Hello. So this is a recorded session, the first session for our geometry class here in college prep. And before we head on to the discussions, let us first have an orient. And ayun, um, I'm really sorry if I have to record a session like this kasi I have important things to do within this day. So I decided to have a recorded session, and just for you to know me more, I am Kurt, and yes, napaka-accurate na mga description dyan. Siyempre, I'm cute, and iko-comfort ka isang dakilang green flag, and ako ang magiging instructor nyo sa geometry. Kaso, ayan, binabagabag pa din ako ng totga. Incoming first year ako, and I love math. And when I say I love it, I really love math. It's like uh, having it as a wife, or having it or making it as a spouse for my entire life. And I also love research, and I also love you, Joe. Sorry kung ganito yung boses ko. It's so early in the morning. And dagdag dyan, I am currently on a gap year. So meaning I am stopping for this particular academic year only. And sana uh, I I always dream, or I always manifest na maging maayos to and maging productive ang gap year ko. And then I took a gap year kasi because of personal reasons. And here we go. So, so why choose me? Why choose me talaga? So, uh, I joined some contests na I think, yeah, and they're really fun. And they're fun in a way na uh, I learned I learned how to motivate myself to learn in general. Ayun. Especially along joining those competitions, I garnered some circle of friends na I can rely to, uh, and they always make sure na palagi akong gaganahan na mag-review and ipagpatuloy yung pursuit of knowledge. Ayun lang. So what makes me love math and be fascinated with it? So math is everywhere. It's located everywhere. Uh, as you can see, when you have a flower, it has some patterns. It has patterns that it follows. Also, it's applied in real life. It's applied in almost everything, every beauty, every aspect in nature, every problem, every human problem that we experience. It involves some sort of math in it, and that's the fascinating part. And what I'm up to right now, so I am currently bored. Di joke lang. Um, I am doing researches, and I am into joining orgs right now. So you can see me on some Discord servers and some Facebook groups. trying to assist if I could. Basta ang job ko is uh, to make sure na lahat tayo will head on to our dreams, especially our dream school and the dream course. Yes, who else doesn't want to get to their dream course in school? Wala naman, di ba? So, yeah. And speaking of the syllabus, so geometry is divided into 15 chapters. And ang commitment and pressure natin is minimal. I don't want you to commit much on what I'm gonna teach because I don't think na lahat naman yan is lalabas sa sets, but what I really want you to listen along with the entire discussion is that magtuturo ako ng concept, then you're gonna cherish it. Yes, you're gonna cherish it. You're gonna cherish the concept because you can use it all it over and over again. When you have some problem to solve, you can use that, and mula dun sa concept na yun, you can start thinking of more complex ways to deal with something. Yes, commitment and pressure are minimal. Do not pressure yourself. Just uh, just do it uh, self-paced. If if sa tingin mo hindi nakakaya yung discussion, or you think that geometry is hard, uh, please don't think that it is the case. After all, I'm gonna teach this material by concept. So ang chapter 1 natin is the overview of geometry and some of the basic things that you need to know when in our discussions. For the second chapter, we have introduction to proving. We have segments and rays. We have angles and perpendicular lines, parallel lines, polygons, congruent triangles, geometric inequalities, quadrilaterals, similarity, right triangles, coordinate geometry, circles, perimeter, area, and solids. And this last chapter, I have put an asterisk there because it's optional. So this is about elementary geometric constructions. And the forum zone, so hindi na natin magagamit tong forum zone kasi we're out of time. And yes, since wala na, and wala naman tayong time allotment, or wala naman tayong paggagamitan ng time natin for forum since ni-record ko nga lang to. But instead, just slide on my DM. Yeah. Chat me instead. Or this is my FB link. So if you have questions about the discussion, you can message me at this account, or if multiple names, if meron mga multiple names na lumalabas, just remember these two again, my name and my FB link. You can search it both in Facebook. So that's for the Orient. And here's our overview for geometry. I like geometry so much, and and that's one of my favorite branches in math, along with um, algebra, counting, and number theory. So I so we have here geometry. So geometry comes from the two words geo and metria. Geo means earth and metria means measurement. The geometry is basically measurements uh, applied within our planet Earth, and it's the study of shapes. And geometry studies the relationships formed by points, lines, and planes, and other um, other notions related to geometry. So you get to form lots of figures here, and this is not and geometry is not just about having a square, having a rectangle, having a circle. Find their perimeter, find their area, then boom. Geometry is more. Geometry has a lot more in its inside. We're gonna talk about the angles. Uh, we're gonna talk about in a 2D or a 3D sense. So, but first, since alam na natin what is geometry, let us first go to the to the three most basic terms in geometry. But since they're so basic, I mean fundamental. It has lots of definitions in it, and when something has so many definitions in it, and it can't pick and it can't pick and it can pick for itself what to mean in a specific context, we call it as undefined terms. Undefined terms are terms which meanings aren't that so clear. So the first undefined term is the point. Point, as in point, tuldok. A point indicates position. It does not occupy area, and it has no length, width, and height. When we write a point, we simply uh, we simply write it in this manner. Then we read it as point A, or we can simply say that in most cases, when there are figures involved, we can simply just say A. That's the better uh, that's the better way to name points. And the second undefined term is the line. So kanina meron tayong point, then the next one is the line. We have one point, and now we have a set of points. Me, so a line is a collection of points that extend infinitely in both directions. So these are all points joined together, and they extend indefinitely on both directions. A line contains at least 2 points, which I denoted here, x and y. I can name this line as line xy. And read it as line xy or line L. Ganyan. Naka-italics ang L. And for planes, so this is a plane, and it's the third undefined term here. So ito, ang line na to, this is one-dimensional. But this plane, this is two-dimensional. So a plane is a set of points in a flat surface that extends infinitely or indefinitely in all directions. And when we write or when we label a plane, so example, I want this plane to be labeled as R. So I'll put R on one of the four corners of this plane. Actually, since yung shape na ito, the parallelogram like shape, it's just an indicator para mas ma-visualize yung pag-extend ng plane within all directions. But in reality, when you see the definition, as for the definition of a plane, uh, this this occupies all the all the two dimensions possible within its orientation. So that's for the plane. So kung may undefined terms, syempre we have the defined terms. And I choose some defined terms that I think that will be relevant for the future discussions. Actually, lahat naman na magiging future terms na i-discuss natin other than these terms na napili ko is also defined. But let's first talk about the 5 defined terms which I chose for you. So the first defined term is space. And space is the set of all points, whether it may be 1, 2, or 3-dimensional. These are called the space. These are what we call the space. And ayan, this is the set. Ito ang set na tinatawag natin when it comes to geometry. Diba sa ang algebra natin, set has these braces, and you put elements on it like A, B, C, etc. Ngayon, in the context of geometry, we use the word space to indicate a set of all points. Next is the collinear points. Collinear points are points that lie on the same line. Basta nasa same line sila, katulad nitong line with points A, B, C. So since you can locate A, B, and C on the same line, nasa same line silang lahat, therefore we can call this as collinear points. And similarly, coplanar points are points that lie on the same plane. Coplanar points nasa same plane. Ayan. And a plane is a two-dimensional thing. So, parang sa bond paper, kailangan kapag ang ink ng ballpen nasa bond paper talaga. Imagine this as a bond paper, then tinusok or dinampian mo ang bond paper ng ballpen or ng ink ng pentel pen. So you can imagine that scenario as similar to being what you can see in the notion of coplanar points. So coplanar points are points that lie on the same plane. And next, the intersection. So intersection is the set of all points common to two lines, planes, and etc. So this is an example of two lines, two distinct lines intersecting. So when two distinct lines intersect, then they intersect at one and only one point. And the others, which hindi ko na in-include kasi I feel that it's redundant na for it to be included sa ating discussion, non-coplanar and non-collinear. It's just the thing when two points or points or lines for the coplanar and points for collinear. Na for non-coplanar, hindi sila same plane, and for non-collinear, hindi sila same line. And saan natin magagamit yung mga terms na yan? Saan natin magagamit ang defined terms? Saan natin magagamit ang uh, what what lies ahead, or what should we know more about those undefined terms and defined terms? So let us first start on knowing postulates and theorems. Postulates are statements that are accepted as true, and theorems are statements that should be proven true by using definitions, postulates, and previously proven theorems. So, ang postulates, ang pinagkaiba ng postulates sa theorems ay hindi na natin kailangan i-prove ang something when it comes to theorems, and when it comes to postulates, I mean. And when pagdating sa theorem, kailangan pa natin i-prove ang isang specific statement, because sa theorems, some theorems may not be obvious on first glance, or theorems are a product of notion, and they are not trivial in nature. Kumbaga, it hides something. It's a combination of one or two more theorems, or what we can say, definitions, postulates, previously proven theorems, na in turn ginagamit din natin to prove the theorem itself. So sa postulate, ulitin ko lang sa postulate hindi na natin kailangan i-prove ang mga statement na ito, and theorems kailangan pa natin silang i-prove. So examples of postulates, ang halimbawa ng isang postulate: a plane contains at least 3 non-collinear points, and a line consists of at least 2 distinct points. That's for the postulate. And an example of theorem is that if two distinct lines intersect, then they intersect at exactly one point. And take note, madami pang mga postulates or mga theorems na madadaanan, and some of them ay hindi na natin pinapangalanan because ayun, it's a product of logic and reasoning, and since there are a lot of possibilities when it comes to having theorems, and especially when you are capable of proving such theorems, then hindi na natin siya pinapangalanan, because for me lang, it's more of a redundancy issue. So sige. So let's have these following postulates and theorems. So ang postulates natin for today's video is that this number 1, nasa example na to kanina, a plane contains at least 3 non-collinear points, and a line contains at least 2 points. 2 points are contained in one and only one line. Next, 3 non-collinear points determine a unique plane. If 2 points are contained in a plane, then the line that is formed by the 2 points is also contained in the same plane. If the 2 planes intersect, then their intersection is a line. Now for the theorems. So the first 3 theorems that are important to us is as follows. If 2 distinct lines intersect, then they intersect at exactly 1 point. A line and a point not on the line are contained in one and only one plane. And 2 intersecting lines are contained in one and only one plane. So that's for chapter 1. So to wrap up, what did we learn in chapter 1? Well, we did learn first that what geometry is, and the undefined and defined terms na kailangan nating malaman before we head on to postulates and theorems, which are saucy parts when it comes to geometry. Saucy because it's worth using. They are worth using to know more theorems, especially when I wanted to be better at geometry. So I practice a lot of logic and reasoning just to add some concepts in my memory bank. But ayan, let's move on for a while sa chapter 1, and here we are at chapter 2. So bago tayo sumabak sa geometry, the concepts along with it, or the geometrical terms and knowledge na kailangan nating malaman, let us review some basic algebraic concepts. Natutunan niyo naman din na ito sa grade 7, na which for today's video ini-reiterate ko lang para solid. Okay. So ang part 1 ng ating algebraic concepts is the properties of real numbers. So for the number 1, we call this commutative property. And for number 2, I call this associative, kasi you can switch the parentheses and it doesn't affect the sum or product. Ganun din sa commutative. Pag binaliktad mo ang order ng addends or factors, it doesn't affect the sum. And number 3, we have the inverse. Each real number has its own inverse. When you add a by its inverse, it becomes 0. When you multiply a by its inverse, 1 over a, it becomes 1. And this is the identity property, wherein you add something and the quantity doesn't change. And these are the things that you need to remember when you involve 0 in division processes. So when you divide 0 by any real number a not equal to 0, then the result is 0. But when you divide a by 0, that's undefined. Number 6. A negative sign on a real number is a result of that real number, the positive part of it, being multiplied by negative 1. And hindi na natin nire-write si negative 1 because super redundant siya. So what do we do is just denote it as a negative sign. And negative AB, ito technically this is a commutative property. Pero I made a separate I considered it as separate para mas ma-visualize ninyo yung property na it can be true whether kung saan nyo ilalagay yung sign, sa A ba o sa B. Yung sign is negative, itong minus, saan nyo ba siya ilalagay, sa A o sa B, it doesn't matter. And the last property for the real numbers is the distributive property. So and this is a quantity n such that when you multiply it to this expression, it distributes over these terms. So it multiplies a sub 1, it multiplies a sub 2, it multiplies a sub 3, it multiplies so on. Paulit-ulit lang. And yan, nilagyan ko na ng hints para ayos. Now, since tapos na tayo sa real numbers, then let us head on to equality. So this is our part 2 sa algebraic concept natin about equality. This is the first one is the reflexive property. A reflexive property is that any real number is equal to itself. Now for the second one, we have symmetric. So if A equals B, then B equals A. Much more similar sa commutative. For the third one is the transitive property. Kumbaga, pasa-pasa to. Pasa-pasa. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. Kumbaga, the quantities that were far together, if they seem far enough to be together or be considered as equality in just two variables, then this is what we do. This is the transitive property of equality. And number 4, if A equals B, then we can do the following. We can either add on both sides, we can either multiply on both sides. And for number 5, its converse is true. Ang kabaliktaran niya, ayan. Ang kabaliktaran niya is true. If nag-add tayo or nag-multiply ng isang quantity, then pwede natin yung bawiin by subtracting both sides or dividing both sides by C. And this is the substitution principle. If A equals B and A plus C equals D, then B plus C equals D. Ang nagbabagong variables is A and B. So this applies especially kapag nagsosolve tayo ng linear equation and we want to check if such a solution is correct. So yan ang substitution. Tapos na tayo sa properties of real numbers, tapos na tayo sa equality. Doon naman tayo sa inequality. So, konti lang ang properties ng inequality. So, the first one is what we call the trichotomy principle. Okay, let me write that. This is what we call this as the trichotomy principle. And it states that only one among these three is true. Either it's equal, either A is equal to B, or it's greater or less than to B. Then here, if A is less than B, then A plus C is less than B plus C as well. As well as the converse. Parang ano to? Pwedeng mag-add both sides, pwedeng magbawas both sides. So, totoo din yung baliktad nito. It's also true if you have greater than signs as well. Palitan lang natin yan. Kunyari ganyan. Then, the sign of this, the sign of the conclusion, ganito din. This is what we call the conclusion. And this is what we call the hypothesis, which I'm gonna discuss sa if and then statements. And next, so ang pinagkaiba nitong property number 3 is here. This is about the sign of the quantity C. When this inequality is multiplied both sides by a positive quantity, then it retains the symbol. And kapag nag-multiply tayo both sides ng inequality by a negative quantity, then na-flip ang inequality symbol natin. Bakit? So let's have an example. So 1 is greater than 3. So when we multiply both sides by negative 2, this becomes negative 2 less than negative 6. Ang 6, mas kanan pa siya, mas kaliwa pa siya sa negative 2. Kumbaga, ito si 0, ito negative 1, ito negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5, negative 6. Mas maliit si negative 6 kay negative 2. Kasi si negative 2, mas malapit siya kay 0. Si 6 ay mas malayo. Hence, it's smaller. Okay, I'm just gonna remove this stuff. So now we have this absolute value. Absolute value, what we do in absolute value is that we always take the positive part of a real number. For example, we have an absolute value of A. Then, its absolute value is A. Itong system na to, this just means this one. Whether what is the sign of your absolute value, whether it be positive or negative, it will always yield the positive one. Except for 0. The absolute value of 0 is 0. I separated it because walang sign ang 0. So yeah. And say for example, you have 2 points on a real number line, then these distances will represent this this real number will represent the distance between the two numbers a and b. Oh, so again, our review on algebraic concepts. Part 1 is about the properties of real numbers. The part 2 is about equality. Part 3 was about inequality. And part 4 was about absolute value. Now, for for uh, for today's video, ito ang if-then statements. And it's too informal for me to call this an if-then statement. So I would call this a conditional instead. Actually, conditional talaga ang tawag dyan. Any conditionals any statements that have a hypothesis and conclusion, they are considered as conditionals. So conditionals are a combination of two statements P and Q, then stated of the form if P, then Q. Ang if statement natin is ang hypothesis, then ang then statement is the conclusion. For example, if three non-collinear points determine a plane, yan ang statement. Yun yung pinaka-statement natin. Now, when we want this to be converted into an if-then statement, then here will be the answer. If 3 points are non-collinear, this is the hypothesis, yung naka-underline. Then also, yung naka-underline na ito, this is what we call the conclusion. If 3 points are not collinear, then they determine a plane. And additionally, we have a truth value that applies for all conditionals. A conditional can either be true or false. Pwedeng tama or mali. Na all tama. Siyempre, sana all palaging tama. Diba mga girls? Joke lang. Generalize. But anyway, let's move on from that joke. I know it's not funny. So types of conditional statements. So conditional statements come into various forms. Then nakakatalo sila on this one. So for a regular conditional, we have if P then Q. Sa converse, binabaliktad natin. Ang conclusion ang naging if statement, then ang then statement natin ay yung P, yung hypothesis. Ngayon, kapag inverse naman, ang nangyayari, yung counterpart ng P, then ng Q. Then ang contrapositive is yung pinagbaliktad na inverse. So for example, let us have this conditional. If minor ka pa, then hindi ka pa 18 years old. So ang converse nun, ang converse ng statement na ito is that, babaliktarin mo to. If hindi ka pa 18 years old, dilipat natin siya sa if statement, then minor ka pa. Itong minor ka pa ang magiging hypothesis natin. Ayan. So if hindi ka pa 18 years old, then minor ka pa. That's for the converse. Kapag inverse, if hindi ka na minor, okay, take note ha, if hindi ka na minor, negative P yun. Kapag P naman, if minor ka pa, and hindi ka na minor. So, if hindi ka na minor, then at least 18 years old ka na. And for the contrapositive part, if at least 18 years old ka na, then hindi ka na minor. Pinagbaliktad lang natin ulit. Ayan. And bonus, hahabol tong isang type ng conditional. We have the biconditional. Biconditional from the word bi, dalawa. It's a combination of conditional and converse. More like it secures, it becomes more specific when it comes to stating something. Conditional, if P then Q, plus ang converse natin, or yung reversed form ng conditional, it becomes a biconditional pag pinagsama. So the statements will go P if and only if Q. Babalik tayo sa example ng minor. So, ang conditional natin is if minor ka pa, then hindi ka pa 18 years old. Then, ang converse is yung kabaliktaran yan, o yung reverse conditional. Then, the biconditional would be minor ka pa if and only if hindi ka pa 18 years old. Okay. So, now for the truth value. Ganito lang ang pattern ng truth values when it comes to conditionals. So, if a conditional is true, we cannot say na kung true or false ba ang conditional natin. Necessarily true or false na yung iba. So, magdedepende yon sa truth value table. Tandaan na ang laging may same truth value is ang conditional and contrapositive. So, as you can see here, conditional and contrapositive, pareha silang true and pareha silang false. As you can see, ito sa unang tatlo. And also, ang magkakaparehong ng truth value is ang converse and inverse. Pareha sila lagi ng truth value. As kung false ang converse, false din ang inverse. Kung ang converse ay true, true din ang inverse. Tandaan na ayan, true, false, false, true, 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 and false, true, true, false. Hindi ko na sinama yung isa kasi alam niyo what is that thing. And that thing is what we call, ayan, yung kabaliktaran nitong true, 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 true na yan. False, 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 false. Ayan, so marunong tayo mag-if. Tapos, then, if minor ka pa, then hindi ka na 18 years old. So, how can we use them in proof writing? So, proof writing has, before we go to proof writing pala, so we should know muna. We should know things muna related to proving, such as reasoning. So, there are two methods in reasoning. First is the inductive and next is the deductive one. Kapag inductive, it uses specific statements or facts to arrive at the general conclusion. Mula sa maliit na info, hahanapan natin ng pattern, and finally, ayun, we're gonna conclude na ito ang pattern, ito ang formula. Ganun ang inductive. Kapag deductive naman, papaliit ang pattern. Hindi, papaliit yung uh, papaliit yung idea, or it uses accepted info to arrive at a specific statement or fact. Specific statement or fact meaning mas nagiging specific siya as it goes through a narrower concept, narrower idea. Or, I mean, more specific, I guess. Nagkakaroon tayo ng mga restrictions, more and more restrictions, hanggang sa mapunta tayo dun sa ganoong idea na to, na ganito itong formula na to, ganito itong concept na to kapag if these points are collinear, if the lines are coplanar, if ganito ang angles, and etc. Pumapaliit yung idea kapag deductive. Pumapaliit, nagiging mas specific. And that's what we're gonna do, or that's where we're gonna focus on proof writing, the style of deductive reasoning. Since we are studying geometry and the very basics, we use those bigger ideas to get into the things na gusto nating malaman or gusto nating mapatunayan. You can prove efficiently either by two-column proving, auxiliary tools, and or paragraphs. Ang auxiliary tools ay tatanggalin ko muna since I think it's not technically qualified to be a type of proving. So sige, ang two-column proof is yung pinaka-common na way ng pag-prove ng mga geometrical relationships. Advantage ng two-column proof is that mas nakikita natin yung development of proof. Tapos mayroon yung mga statements. Then bakit ganon? Bakit yun yung nilagay na? Ba't siya kasama sa proof natin? Ano bang reason niya? Bakit siya relevant para sa bagay na gusto nating i-prove? So ito yung format niya. Two columns. So on the left side we have the statement, and for the right side we have the reason. The statement, kung ano yung naobserbahan mo, and kung bakit nagkaganon. Yun yung ilalagay natin sa reason. Okay, for example, given na ang line and a point is not on the line, so you're gonna prove that the point and the line is contained in one and only one plane. So now, I want you to wait for just 10 seconds. Okay, so here we go. So about sa pag-prove ng problem na ito, gamit yung mga postulates, yung theorems, yung definitions na inaral natin before tayo mag-proceed sa ganitong topic. Kasi itong topic na to, this is more on analysis na. And what you're gonna do for a two-column proof is that this is what I did sa pag-prove Ay, balik muna tayo. Ito ang given. Ayan. I did draw the plane, the line, the point for visualization. So, ang kailangan nating i-prove is that yung point na yun, yung T, and yung line na nasa, ayan, yung line na kasama is on plane H. Siya yung unique plane na nagko-contain sa dalawang bagay na iyan, which is the point and the line. So, paano ba ang plano para ma-prove natin yung mga statements na ganyan using two-column proof style? So, una, clearly state what is given and what is to be proven. Ayan. And since a specific figure is not given, as most times for proving theorems, we can draw a figure. Ngayon, nag-draw na tayo ng figure sa improvisation ko lang ang figure na iyan, pero the original problem did not have a figure. So, yep, that's exactly what I did on that case. We made the figure, and that figure is the plane H, point T, and line B. This is the figure for this problem. And then, develop a plan. When you develop a plan, you kadalasan you have a rough draft of paano mo siya ipo-prove. Nagbe-brainstorm ka, ano yung dapat mong munang ilagay, kasi in order yan eh. Hindi pwedeng halo-halo. Yung thought ng proof mo. Even though lahat ng mga nilagay mo sa statements and reasons is relevant siya for proving something, or lahat ng yun nilagay mo na, pero halo-halo siya, wala lang din kasi magiging unclear yung magiging unclear yung visualization ng problem. So, kailangan in order natin ipapakita yung mga ideas, postulates, and katulad niyan, yung number 2 dapat related siya sa number 1, itong number 3 related sa number 2 and number 1 up until 6. Itong 6, ito yung pinaka-last na statement na bunga ng statements na ito from 1 to 5. Dapat from first to last ang lalagay natin ng statements para ang idea is nakikita pa din yung reason kung bakit ba totoo, why such a notion in geometry takes place. So, okay, we have yung first take ko muna sa statements is that, ayan, inassignan ko lang ng point, pangalan ng point and line. So, point T is on line D. So, yun yung first statement ko. And that is a given. As you can see, a line and a point not on the line. Then, ayan, nilagay ko. I-translate ko siya in a way na pinangalanan ko yung lines and points. Next, the next thing that I did, since napangalanan ko na siya, then I will add another thing to consider. So line D contains the points J and K. Ayan. So that line contains these points. And yung J and K na yun, hindi sila collinear ni T. Yun yung pinaka napansin ko. Nagtingnan ko yung basic. From the basic, ang nilagay ko is points T, J, and K are non-collinear. Hindi sila of the same line. So, ayan. Since hindi sila of the same line, then, but tatlo silang points na binanggit ko, then, they are contained in plane H. Kasi, alam ko or nadaanan natin na ang 3 non-collinear points, basta kahit anong 3 non-collinear points yan, are contained on one and only one plane. They have a unique plane for them. So, meaning, kung yung dalawang points na yon, yung J and K, nasa plane H, as well as the line itself. Line D is also on plane H. And, ayan. Hence, makukuha ko itong statement na ito. Since line D is also on plane H, ayan, I can use this as a reason para ma-prove itong statement na to, or mag-arrive sa statement na ito, which is the conclusion ng proof. Yan. That's for the two-column proof. Now, we have the essay form. So, ang essay form, this forms the proof. This is when I form the proof, not in a two-column, syempre, but I form this as a paragraph, parang essay. This is more convenient, lalo na if you need to type your proof. Ang kadalasan sa math forums na napupuntaan ko is medyo hindi conventional ang paggamit ng two-column proof. What they use instead is that they use this kind of proving system na pa-essay, diba? So, given that a line and a point is not on the line, so I'm gonna prove that, ayan, yun yung same problem na ginawa natin ng proof. But this time, ginawa ko siyang essay. It's similar lang din. Like kung ano yung nilagay natin sa una, sunod-sunod lang siya until sa ma-prove natin. Ayan. Yung signal na na-prove ko nga ang problem is, since nilagay ko na itong statement na ito, itong sentence na ito, I just did indicate that the result follows, since it will just be analogous with respect to the recent statement, yung statement na katabi niya. Itong if J and K are in plane H, so is the line that contains them. So that's the essay form of a proof. Next one. So, tapos na tayo sa proving and tapos na din tayo mag-review ng concepts. So, let us go to one of the gateways in real geometry. So, ayan na. So, this is chapter 3 and we're gonna measure segments. So, actually this chapter is about segments and rays. But first, what are we gonna discuss first is bago tayo dumaan sa kung ano ba ang rays, kung ano ba ang under nila, let us recap on the ways on measuring something. Yan, measuring segments. Say for example, you have 2 points A and B. Then you can locate them on the real number line. Ngayon, ang distance ng dalawang points na ito is the absolute difference ng kanilang coordinates sa real number line. So which is A and B. Ayan yung definition ng absolute value na sinabi ko kanina. Which is ang absolute difference of two quantities. Then on the similar notion, itong ruler placement na ito, line AB has a distance of D. So sometimes in the middle of the ruler, we set something as 0 and move forward. So like that, yun yung pinapaliwanag dito sa second way of measuring segments. Palagi tayo nagsa-start sa 0 then forward. Then dito naman, we can do like absolute value on the distance. So itong my green na yan, this is called as the ruler postulate. And this yellow ruler, this corresponds to this ruler placement postulate. So what's within the distance? So the distance between 2 points is the absolute value of the differences of the coordinates of 2 points. And this distance na ito, this is one-dimensional, meaning it is only with respect to the line containing the 2 points. For example, ayan ang distance. Let's say we have 3 points A, B, and C. Then AB, ito, ang distance ang sukat ng line AB is 4. Ang BC is 2. Ang AC is 6. Yan, nilagay ko naman yung mga computations natin na ito ang coordinates. Then we just followed what was stated kanina sa absolute values or the ruler postulate. So that's -1 minus 3, 3 minus 5, and -1 minus 5. And we come up with these answers. Ayan. Tinake out lang natin lahat ng negative na sagot since absolute values are always positive. And interesting kasi 3 points yan. And they mean something meaningful. Especially itong si B. Napapagitnaan siya ni A and ni C. Ayan. So when you see here, you can look at the AB, BC, and AC. Itong AB 4, itong BC 2, itong AC 6. So meaning, ayan, 4 plus 2. 4 plus 2 equals 6. Meaning, ang AC can also be expressed as the sum of distance from AB and from AB plus BC. And that's what we call as betweenness. Betweenness is when point B is between A and C. If in point B is between A and C, if and only if it satisfies the following conditions: A, B, and C are collinear and distinct, and AB plus BC equals AC. Ayan. So, ayan. AB plus BC equals AC. Kumbaga, since nag-add up lang tayo within this line segment, ganun lang din ang magiging sum niya. So, for a line segment, since a line, by definition, it extends infinitely in all directions, a part of it is taken, and it is known as the line segment. Hindi naman pwedeng lines consume natin yung papel natin para lang sa isang line. So, kailangan lang na maiksi yung line natin, and that means we just took a part of the line. Ayan. Kasi since by definition, it extends infinitely in all directions. It has no end. So, we must make something na merong hangganan. So that's when line segment comes into play. So this is a line segment AB. We can write it as this form, line segment AB, or just AB. Say B, kunyari naman, say B is on line segment AC. If it divides AC into equal lengths AB and BC, then we can say that B is the midpoint of AC. Take note ha, nasa line segment siya, and it divides AC into these parts na parehas ang sukat. So here I have a version 1, I have a version 2 of the lengths. Dito nag-start tayo sa 0 up to D. Ang distance ng dalawang ito is D over 2. And for here, we have A and B as the starting and ending point. Then ang midpoint can be located at this coordinate A plus B over 2. But the distance of these points is B minus A over 2. So galing siya sa notion ng absolute value. But since I know na mas malaki ang B sa A, then I can just simply write B minus A over 2. And aside from having a midpoint, we also have a segment bisector, and they can be line, segment, ray, or plane that intersects the segment at its midpoint. These are two examples of bisectors. So line L bisects AC at B. Ito ay isang line, and it bisects at B. Tumatama ang line sa midpoint ni AC. And AB and CD bisect each other at I. So meaning to say, parehas nilang midpoint ang I ng segment CD at ng segment AB. They have these both midpoint I. Segments that have the same length are congruent. Whether pag ganito siya, hindi. Whether parallel man sila, whether they can be located, they are on different orientations, basta same sila ng length, these are called congruent. And when they have the same lengths, yan, for example, we have segment AB, we have segment CD, and they have the same length of 3, we can say that they are both congruent. And ayan ang symbol to denote congruence between two line segments. Or, pwede din namang ganyan. This is a simpler way. Pero ito yung mas proper na symbol to write when it comes to geometry. So that's for the line segments. Nothing much. And now let's move on to rays. Rays have one endpoint and they also extend indefinitely in one direction. So this is ray AB. So ganyan ang pagkakapangalan sa kanya. Magmumula tayo sa vertex. The vertex kung saan magsisimula yung pag-forward ng direction, such as this one. So this is ray AB. Ito, A, B. So kapag nauna ang letter na ito, this means na siyang ang kasunod na point nito na dadaanan ng ray is AB. So lines are also called as opposite rays. They are collinear rays that have a common endpoint. Lines are opposite rays. So meaning, ayan, collinear rays pala. Nadagdagan ng thought, collinear rays. When we say collinear rays, then they can be located on the same line. So meaning to say, itong ganitong form, I mean this one. Ayan. Yung ganitong form, opposite yan sila. Hindi sila opposite. They are not collinear rays pala. And hence, this is not a line. But lines are collinear rays. So hindi siya magkakaroon ng inclination. It doesn't have an inclination. It's just a straight line. Line, yan, for the example, line L is composed of rays PO and PQ to denote opposite rays. Kaya ginawa kong ganyan. Kasi ang O, meaning ganito ang direction niya, pa left. Itong O na to is yung second point na madadaanan ni point P, ng ray P, with respect to the left side. And for the right side, we have PQ. PQ, ang second point, so it means this ray goes to the right. So if we are clear to that, let us explore the last topic for this chapter, and ultimately for this session. For the meantime, this is about convex sets. So what are convex sets? Medyo fresh to. Especially, this is a thing that's not always tackled in the classroom. So a set or an unbounded region they can be unbounded or bounded, is said to be convex if for every 2 points A, B in that region, then that segment is on R as well. So this is what I mean on convex sets. Lahat ng points hindi lalabas ng set. Ito ang hindi convex. Ayan. This is the convex, this is the not convex points. Convex sets. Kasi merong, itong part na to, lumabas siya ng set. So, meaning, hindi siya convex set. Ito din, merong part ng line, segment, na nakalabas ng set. So, meaning, hindi din siya convex set. So, that just means na all of the points in the line segment is also in R. Dapat lahat ng points na yan sa segment na yan nasa R. And, ayun. The best thing about convex sets is that you can divide them into two. But how can we divide them? By just a line. A line on a plane can divide the plane into two convex sets so that when one point on each set are joined together as a line segment, they intersect the line. So for example, ayan, tawag sa kanya is plane separation. So these dots show convex sets. Meaning to say, if we make these lines intersect each other, or if we join this line as a segment, kasi nga galing sila sa dalawang magkahiwalay na sets na napamagitan ng line na ito that extends indefinitely. So when we join these lines, when we join these points together, it intersects the line separating the sets. So nothing much about plane separation, but I just wanna give you trivia about the notion. Say for example, kapag meron tayong one line, we can divide a plane into two convex sets. If we have two lines, then that convex sets is further divided into 4. Kapag 3 lines naman, nagiging 7. And the last one, kapag 4 lines naman, nagiging 11 sila. Bakit? So, and paano naman yung iba? Paano naman yung panlima, pan-anim, pagpitong lines? So, how does that happen? So, meron tayong one line, 2 line, 3 line, 4 line. So, we have 2 convex sets for this line, 2 lines 4, 3 lines 7, 4 lines 11. So if you think na ang number of convex sets sa 5 lines ay 16, then you're right. Tama. As well as the 6. Para masigurado mong tama ang iniisip mo, ang number ng convex sets na nasa 6, ng number of sets, convex sets within 6 lines is 22. Yan. So, paano ba nangyayari yan? So, say for example, ayan, let us denote these phases, number of regions by R. No. Convex sets. So what's the better notation? S. Ayan. S of 1, we have S of 2, we have S of 3, S of 4, S of 5, S of 6, up to n, then s sub n. Ayan. So if there are n lines, then we have s sub n faces. S sub n regions, I mean. So, diba, as you can see, when we ang nangyayari dito sa problem na ito is that 2 plus 2 equals 4. And kapag pinlas mo ng 3, magiging 7. Pag pinlas mo tong 7 by 4, magiging 11. Pag pinlas mo tong 11 by 5, magiging 16. Pag pinlas mo tong 16, magiging 22. And it happens on and on sa sets na yun. So Hana, what can we do is I'll try to find an explicit formula kung paano ko mape-predict kung ilan yung regions na mabubuo ng n lines. N lines that are not parallel to the other n minus 1 lines. Okay. So for that, since nakita naman natin yung pattern, so I'm gonna say that I'm gonna start from here. I'm gonna tell you that S sub n, or I just noticed that this is the behavior ng pattern. So S sub n, so I'll just denote this as S sub n equals to S sub n minus 1 plus n. So that's the behavior of the lines. That's the behavior kung paano dumami yung regions. I mean. Okay, so hindi, para mas ma-visualize nyo ito. So S sub 2 equals S sub 1 plus 2. S sub 3 equals S sub 2 plus 3. S sub 4 equals S sub 3 plus 4 up to S sub n equals S sub n minus 1 plus n. And then what we're gonna do is to switch these terms, this number of regions, into the left. So we have S sub 2 minus S sub 1 equals 2. Same for here. Same for here. Up to the S sub n. Ngayon, what I am going to do now, since interesting itong negative sign na ito, this negative sign is interesting, so I can add them all up. I can add them all up to get so that maka-cancel itong lahat ng terms na ito. S sub 2, S sub 3, up to S sub n minus 1. Maka-cancel silang lahat. So S sub n minus S sub 1, this is equals to 2 plus 3 plus 4 up to n. Since meron tayong value ng S sub 1, we have S sub n minus 2 is equals to 2 plus 3 plus 4 up to n. And what I can do now is switch the negative 2 to the other side. And I wanted na itong 2, i-express ko siya as 1 plus 1. Kasi para mag-blend siya dito sa sum na ito. Kasi feel ko siya ang missing part for that sum. For this whole sum. So 1 plus 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 up to n. Then I can group these terms, and we have a formula actually here, and I think na lesson na itong formula na ito sa pre-calc. So para mabilis tayo, I'm just gonna express it as a shorthand. So this is S sub n. Ayan. So with that in mind, hindi na natin kailangan magbilang pa manually ng regions for here. Hindi natin siya kailangan bilangin manually, because what we can do is we can count in we can predict how many regions or how many convex sets can we form by this formula. So that's actually the trivia for actually the bonus. So ito, n lines that are non-parallel to n minus 1 lines. Yan, so for n lines, n lines that are not parallel to each other, can form n times n plus 1 over 2 plus 1 convex sets. So that's it. So if you were satisfied sa session natin, please give me a comment sa Google Classroom, and I hope na I could still get along with our future discussions, and sana nga that discussion would be via meeting, na via Google Meet, via Zoom, via anything na magkikita tayo para mas interactive. Ayan, so thank you so much, and I am very grateful na I have lectured a lot of lessons para sa inyo. So if meron kayong mga info na nais i-inquire, or mga topics na hindi nyo na tandaan saan man banda yon, you can just slide through my DM sa aking Facebook, or you can use this Discord. So that's Puno ng Dapyaw. number 6686. So thank you so much again, and I hope na face-to-face na nga tong, hindi, face-to-face tuloy. Makakasama ko na kayo on our next session. I'll see you soon, and I hope that you are doing well and stay healthy and keep safe. Padayon sa inyong college dreams. Bye!